It's my turn. I just want to say how much I love being part of this and how much fun it is to gather oneself and get here and stand up here and tell you all the story. This is a story about a gust of wind. It's a story about disappointment. And it is not the story I was planning to tell you tonight, the one I rehearsed for a couple weeks, so please forgive that I need to have pages to keep me on track. During World War II, Jews in Budapest were brought to the edge of the Danube, ordered to remove their shoes and shot dead falling into the river below. This is the very short version of how my grandmother's shoes were not left on the bank of the Danube River. In 1921, a neighbor brought my family warning just minutes before soldiers crashed through their front gate looking for Jews to arrest. When a soldier climbed the ladder to the attic where they hid my grandfather, a pious rabbi, held aside his beard to contribute a breath, which blew out the candle, and the soldier, who must have been afraid of the dark, went away, muttering about squirrels, I was told, and my grandparents, their children, and the neighbor who warned them all lived. And the breath that snuffed the soldier's candle brought a voice to my grandfather's ear that he took as instruction from an angel of God. He left for America a few months later, and within 2 years my grandmother sailed on a ship named the Majestic, in steerage for a week with 6 children in order to join him. You get the point. We are survivors. We turn ourselves towards life. This is not the story I planned to tell you tonight, but after the shooting at the shul in Pittsburgh, it is the one my DNA commands I tell. When I was a second grader, I carried a menorah to school for show and tell, the candlestick for Hanukkah. I lived in a rural town. There were only 5 Jewish kids in the entire school. Like every American kid with a television set, Charlie Brown and his gang had taught me the true meaning of Christmas, and I knew all about Rudolph and Santa and the abominable snowman. I learned Christmas carols at school, and naively and without considering there might be consequences, I stood in front of the class and held up my family's menorah with the little bits of colored wax still on it from the night before. All of a sudden, before I could say a word about the Maccabees or a dreidel, a little girl stood up in the back of the room, pointed right at me, and started screaming at the top of her lungs. It is the first reference I remember hearing to the Holy Ghost, who was called upon to strike me down on the spot because Jews and I had killed Jesus. I could not have been less prepared for this, and our teacher clearly wasn't prepared either, because she sent me out into the hall where I sat alone in my cubby, hugging the menorah to my trembling chest and trying not to hear the hoof beats of Cossacks. Always so near in the imagination of a Jewish kid whose bubby tells stories of hiding. I have no idea what the teacher said to my classmates. I was eventually fetched from the hall during a penmanship lesson, and no one looked up from their paper as I slid into my seat. The boys stuffed snowballs with rocks and used me for target practice at recess. That night at bedtime, my mother taught me Yiddish phrases to throw back at the schoolyard bullies. An elephant's stamm roift dein tuches. May your nose grow like an elephant's trunk to blow up your ass. I never said it aloud, but reciting this curse in my head made me laugh inside, and the laughter itself was a kind of self-protection. Many years after my grandmother told me the story of the soldier and the candle and the breath of destiny in the attic, I discovered that my grandfather had written a deathbed confession, a vidui, apologizing to my grandmother for bringing her to America, a place which deeply disappointed him because the cultural atmosphere was morally unclean for an observant Jewish family. He lamented coming to this country and was sorry he could not live to return them all to Europe. He died in 1933, 6 years before the Nazis drove their tanks into Poland. If he had lived, he would have thanked the angel that whispered in his ear to emigrate. Almost all the family who stayed behind were lost in the war. We say lost, but really, they stepped out of their shoes and were shot on the bank of the Danube River, or sent off on trains to die in Polish camps. All of the people, all sorts of people, every family in this room has a story like my family's. A story of events so terrible it would cause them to leave behind home, family, livelihood, even the graves of their ancestors. All of them having heard the voice of some angel on the wind imploring them to save themselves by going. No matter the risks or hugeness of the unknown, no matter the possibility of disappointment. The Holy Ghost never did strike me down, and there are now over 1,000 descendants who name my grandparents as their own. I don't know how to end this story, and the clock has run out, so do this thing with me. Put your hand over your heart and listen through your fingers. That's the beat of your own life thrumming through this muscle, which is the size of your fist. I know you feel it too. You get the point. We are survivors. We turn ourselves towards life. L'chaim.